आज हमारा लेक्चर है कैटेगराइजेशन ऑफ मेजर क्लस्टरिंग मेथड। इन गेट में बंद कर लो। कैटेगराइजेशन ऑफ मेजर क्लस्टरिंग मेथड्स। अब मेजर क्लस्टरिंग मेथड्स में क्या क्या कैटेगराइजेशन होता है इनके बारे में हम देखेंगे वन बाय वन। तो सबसे पहले हम बात करेंगे कि ये कैटेगराइजेशन होता क्या है डेटा माइनिंग के अंदर। ये कैटेगराइजेशन एक मेजर क्लस्टरिंग मेथड्स के रूप में होता है। इसके अंदर जो कैटेगराइजेशन मेथड, जो क्लस्टरिंग मेथड्स होते हैं वो अलग अलग तरीके से होते हैं। जिस तरीके से हायरार्किकल मेथड होता है, डेंसिटी बेस्ड मेथड होता है, ग्रिड मेथड होते हैं, मॉड्यूल बेस्ड मेथड्स होते हैं, कंस्ट्रेंट बेस्ड मेथड्स होते हैं, ये सारे सारे होते हैं। इनके अंदर जब हम बात करते हैं then you will learn about the clustering and its type. Take a look at the different type of clustering methods below. One is the density based clustering, another one is the db scan density based spectral clustering of application with noise. एक होता है optics ordering point to identify the clustering structure. एक होता है HDBS scan hierarchical density based spectral clustering of application with noise. ये तो एक होता है हायरार्किकल क्लस्टरिंग, एक होता है फजी क्लस्टरिंग, एक होता है पार्टनिंग क्लस्टरिंग, एक होता है PAM पार्टीशन अराउंड मिडियोज, एक होता है ग्रिड बेस्ड क्लस्टरिंग। इसमें सबसे पहले हम बात करेंगे रीड consider yourself to be in a conversation with the chief marketing officer of your organization. Like organization wants to understand the customer better with the help of the data so that it can help its the business goals and deliver a better experience to the customer. Now this is one of the scenario where the clustering comes to the recursive. Then after the clustering help to organize the data into structure for it to be reachable and understandable. When the big data is into the picture, clustering comes to the recuse. Now this not only help in the structuring the data but also for the better business decision making. एक होता है क्लस्टरिंग बेसिकली ग्रुप्स डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ द डेटा इनटू वन ग्रुप, सो इट हेल्प्स इन ऑर्गेनाइजिंग दैट डेटा वेयर द डिफरेंट फैक्टर्स एंड पैरामीटर्स are involved. All through there are the different type of clustering and various clustering techniques that make the work faster and easy. Keep reading the article to know more. Then हम बात करते हैं हेलो 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 देन हम बात करते हैं व्हाट इज द क्लस्टरिंग। क्लस्टरिंग होता क्या है। जब हम डेंसिटी बेस्ड क्लस्टरिंग मेथड्स के बारे में बात करेंगे, इन सारे मेथड्स के बारे में बात करेंगे, तो सबसे पहले हम रीड करते हैं कि व्हाट इज द क्लस्टरिंग। बाद में हम बात करेंगे व्हाट आर द क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ क्लस्टर्स। देन क्लस्टरिंग इज ए टाइप ऑफ द अनसुपरवाइज्ड लर्निंग मेथड ऑफ मशीन लर्निंग। In the unsupervised learning method, the inference are drawn from the data sets which do not contain labeled output variable. It is an exploratory data analysis technique that allow us to analyze the multivariate data sets. एक होता है clustering is a task of dividing the data sets into a certain number of clusters in such a manner that the data point belonging to the cluster have similar characteristics. Cluster are nothing but the grouping of data points such that the distance between the data points within the clusters is minimal. Clustering is done to segregate the group with the similar trains. Then what are the type of clustering methods? क्या होता है clustering methods के type? The clustering itself can be categorized into two types via hard clustering and soft clustering. In hard clustering, one data point can belong to one cluster only, but in soft clustering, the output provides is a probability likelihood of a data point belonging to each of the predefined numbers of clusters. Then density based clustering. Density based clustering क्या होता है? In this method, the clusters are created based upon the density of the data point which are represented in the data space. The region that become dense due to the high number of data point residing in that the region are considered as clusters. इससे पहले अब हम बात करेंगे व्हाट आर द क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ क्लस्टर्स. क्लासिफिकेशन क्या होता है क्लस्टर्स के अंदर, उसके बारे में हम बात कर रहे हैं. इसके अंदर होता है क्लस्टरिंग इज ए प्रोसेस ऑफ ग्रुपिंग ए सेट ऑफ इंस्टेंस इनटू ए सेट ऑफ सब क्लासेस दैट आर कॉल्ड एज द क्लस्टर्स, and it is also known as the learning by observation, automatic classification, data segmentation, unsupervised learning, etc. What are the broad three category of clustering techniques? Below are the main clustering method used in machine learning. One is the partition clustering, another one is density based clustering, एक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन मॉड्यूल बेस्ड क्लस्टरिंग. व्हाट आर क्लासिफिकेशन क्लस्टरिंग टेक्निक इन डेटा माइनिंग? क्लासिफिकेशन एंड क्लस्टरिंग आर टेक्निक्स used in data mining to analyze the collected data. Classification is used to label data, while clustering is used to group similar data instances together. Then in clustering a classification methods, clustering is the same as the classification in which data is grouped. Through unlike classification, the group are not previously defined. Instead, the grouping is achieved by the determining similarity between data according to characteristics found in the real data. The group are called clusters. What are classification techniques? Classification is a technique in which similar data sets are classified in one set based on their characteristics. In classification, a classifier or module is made to predict the class level attributes. The basic task of classification is to forecast the target class for every kind of data. Every kind of data. Where are the three major steps इन क्लस्टर एनालिसिस? कौन कौन सी क्लस्टर एनालिसिस होती हैं? द हायरार्किकल क्लस्टर एनालिसिस follows three basic steps. One is the calculate the distance, link the cluster, choose a solution by selecting the right number of clusters. एक होता है what is the best clustering method. कौन सा होता है? K-mean is probably the most well known clustering algorithm. Is taught in a lot of introductory data science and machine learning. It's easy to understand and implement in code. दो मेथड कौन कौन से होते हैं? What are the two methods of cluster analysis? एक होता है there are two type of grid based clustering methods. One is string and clue. Steps involved in the grid based clustering algorithm are divide data space into a finite number of cells. एक होता है how many type of clustering are there. The major type of clustering analysis are centroid based, partition clustering, hierarchical based clustering, distribution based clustering, density based clustering, and fuzzy based clusterings. What are the major classification of data mining systems? One is the characterization, discrimination, association and correlation analysis, classification, prediction, outlier analysis or evolution analysis. What are the major requirement of clustering analysis? क्या होता है major requirement? One, scalability. We need highly scalable clustering algorithm to deal with large database. Ability to deal with different kind of attribute algorithm should be capable to be applied on any kind of data such as interval based, data categorical and binary data, which is not part of the category of clustering methods. And 5 major steps of data clustering. One is the acquire the data set. First one is, then import all the critical library, then import the data set, identifying and handling the missing value, encoding and categorical data, splitting the database or features scaling. 4 classification of methods. Which type of 4 classification of methods कौन सा होता है? एक public, internal, confidential and restricted. These are 4 classification methods. Then after DBS scan, DB scan, density based spectral clustering of applications with noise. DB scan groups data point together based on the distance metric. It follows the creation for a minimum number of data point. It can discover cluster of different shape and size from a larger amount of data, which is containing noise and outliers. It takes two parameters. If the minimum points, if indicates how close the data point should be to be considered as the neighbor. The creation for the minimum point should be completed to consider the region as a dense region. Then optics, ordering point to identify the clustering structure. Then optics follows as the similar process as DB skin, but overcomes one of its the drawback and inability to from the cluster from data of the arbitrary density. It considered two more parameters, which are core distance and reachability distance. Core distance indicates whatever the data point being considered is core or not by the setting a minimum value for it. Another one, reachability. Reachability distance is the maximum number of core distance and the value of distance matrix that is used to calculating the distance among two data points. One thing to consider about reachability distance is that its the value remains not defined if one of the data point is a core point. Consider about the reachability distance is that its the value remains not defined if one of the data point is a core point. Then HDB scan, hierarchical density based spectral clustering of applications with noise. And then HBD scan is a density based clustering method that extends the DB scan methodology by converting it to a hierarchical clustering algorithms. Then the hierarchical clustering group then the hierarchical clustering group aggregative or also called as the bottom up approach or divides device or also called as the top down approach. The clusters based on the distance matrix. In aggregative clustering internally each data point acts as the cluster and then it groups the cluster one by one. This comes the under in one most suggest after clustering methods. Divide is the opposite of the aggregative. It starts off with all the points into one cluster and divides them to create more clusters. This algorithm creates a distance matrix of all the existing clusters and perform the linkage between the clusters depending on the criteria of the linkage. The clustering of the data points is represented by using a dendrogram. There are the different type of linkage. One is single linkage. In single linkage, the distance between the two clusters is the shortest distance between point in those two clusters. One complete linkage. In complete linkage, the distance between the two clusters is the farthest distance between point in those two clusters. Another one is the average linkage. In average linkage, in the distance between two clusters is the average distance of every point in the cluster with cluster is the average distance of every point in the cluster with every point in another clusters. Then what are the type of partial algorithm? There are two type of partial algorithm which are known as, one is the k-mean clustering algorithm. k-mean clustering algorithm होता क्या है, इसके बारे में बात करते हैं हम. K-mean clustering algorithm is the most common partition algorithm. दूसरी भाषा में मैं अगर इसको बात करूं तो K-mean clustering is an unsupervised learning algorithm that is used to solve the clustering problem in machine learning or data science. In this lecture in machine learning or data science, we will learn what is k-mean clustering algorithm, how the algorithm works, along with the Python implementations. K-mean clustering is an unsupervised algorithm which groups the unlabeled dataset into different clusters. Here, K defines the number of predefined clusters that need to be created in the process. As if K equal to 2, there will be 2 clusters, and for K equal to 3, there will be 3 clusters, and so on. It is an interactive algorithm that divides the unlabeled dataset into k different clustering in such a way that each dataset belongs only one group that has similar properties. It allows us to cluster the data into different groups, and a convenient way to discover the category of groups in the unlabeled dataset on its own without the need for any training. It is the centroid based algorithm where each cluster is associated with a centroid. The main aim of this algorithm is to minimize the sum of distance between the data point and their the corresponding clusterings. In this algorithm, take the unlabeled dataset as the input, divides the dataset into k number of clusters, and repeat the process until it does not find the best cluster. The value of k should be predetermined in the algorithms. कुछ मेन चीजें होती हैं, determines the best value for k center point or centroid by the iterative process. Assign each data point to its the closest k center. Those data points which are near to be the participate k center create clusters. Then k means clustering is the most common partition algorithm. K clustering, k mean reassign each data in the dataset to only one of the new cluster formed. A record or data point is assigned to the nearest cluster using a measure of distance or similarities. There are the following steps used in k-mean clustering. 1. It can select k initial cluster centroid like C1, C2, C3, Ck, and then it can assign each instance x in the S cluster whose centroid is nearest to x. Then next, for each cluster, recompute its the centroid based on which elements are contained in the cluster. Then go to B until convergence is completed. Then it can separate the object data points into k cluster. Then it is used to cluster center centroid equal to the average of all the data points in the cluster. Then it can assign each point to the cluster whose centroid is nearest using the distance functions. Then the initial value for the mean are arbitrary assigned. These can be assigned randomly or perhaps can use the value from the first k input items themselves. The convergence element can be based on the squared error, but there are the required not to be. For example, the algorithm is assigned to different cluster. Other terminations techniques have simply logged at a fixed number of iterations. A maximum number of iterations can be included to ensure the shopping even without convergence. Then the algorithm algorithm D equal to T1, T2 and Tn, set of the elementary number of desired cluster output k. Set of cluster k mean algorithm. Another one, assign initial value for means m1, m2 and mk, then repeat. Again, assign each item ti to the cluster which has the closest mean. Another one, calculate the new mean for each clusters, then until convergence criteria are met. Then the nearest neighbor algorithm, CL, an algorithm that is similar to the single link technique is called the nearest neighbor algorithm. With serial algorithm, item and iterative combined into the current cluster that are closest is this algorithm. A threshold t can be determined if terms will be inserted into the existing cluster or if a new cluster is generated. Then algorithm, then input d equal to t1, t2 and tn, where t1, t2 set of the elements a, then adjacency matrix showing the distance between the elements, then output showing the k, set of cluster nearest neighbor algorithms, then k1 equal to t1, k equal to k1, k equal to 1, 4, I equal to 2 to n, do the find of the tm in some cluster km in k such that the ti on tm is the smallest distance calculated by the k-mean algorithms. Then the hierarchical clustering in data mining. हायरार्किकल क्लस्टरिंग क्या होता है डेटा माइनिंग के अंदर, इसके बारे में हम बात करते हैं. बेटा आवाज आ रही है? हेलो प्रियांक.
यस, ये होती है आवाज.
हाँ बेटा, ऐसे लगा मुझे जैसे नेटवर्क कनेक्ट नहीं हो रहा. देन हम हायरार्किकल क्लस्टरिंग के बारे में बात करेंगे. हायरार्किकल क्लस्टरिंग क्या होता है? द हायरार्किकल क्लस्टरिंग रेफर्स टू एन अनसुपरवाइज्ड लर्निंग प्रोडक्ट. इसके अंदर क्या होता है कि कोई भी एक डेटा सेट होता है जो अनसुपरवाइज्ड होता है, मीन्स कि एक पर्टिकुलर सिक्वेंशियल फॉर्म में नहीं होता है. इसको हम सिंपल भाषा में अनलेबल्ड डेटा सेट भी बोल सकते हैं. अनलेबल्ड डेटा सेट भी हम बोल सकते हैं इसको. अनलेबल्ड डेटा सेट क्या होता है कि जो एक पर्टिकुलर सीक्वेंस में नहीं होता है, जिसको हम ये भी बोल सकते हैं सीधी सीधी भाषा में यूजफुल डेटा नहीं होता है. तो इन सारी चीज़ों को हम यूज लेते हैं. देन अनसुपरवाइज्ड लर्निंग procedure that determines the successive cluster based on the previously defined clusters. It works via grouping data into a tree of clusters. Hierarchical clustering starts by the teaching each data point as an individual cluster. The endpoint refers to the different set of clusters where each cluster is different from the other clusters and the object within each cluster are the same of within each cluster are the same as one another's. अब इसके अंदर ये क्या होता है, जब हम नॉर्मली किसी भी चीज को देखते हैं तो इसके अंदर जो क्लस्टरिंग होता है, इसमें हायरार्किकल क्लस्टरिंग की कुछ चीजें और भी होती हैं। इसके अंदर हायरार्किकल क्लस्टरिंग क्या होता है, एक पॉपुलर मेथड होता है जो ग्रुप करता है किसी भी ऑब्जेक्ट्स को। इट्स क्रिएट्स द ग्रुप so that the object within a group are similar to each other are different from objects in other groups. Clustering are visually represented in the hierarchical tree called as the density. Hierarchical clustering किस यूज में आता है? Hierarchical clustering is the most popular and widely used method to analyze the social network data. In this method, nodes are compared with one another based on their similarity. Large groups are built by joining groups of nodes based on their similarity. Then, what are the two types of hierarchical clustering? There are two types of hierarchical clustering, doing top down and agglomerative bottoms. Then, advantage क्या होता है hierarchical का? The no prior information about the number of clustering required, easy to implement and give best result in some cases. Algorithm can never undo what was done previously. Time complexity of at least O n square log n is required where n is the number of data points. Then hierarchical clustering involves the creating clusters that have a predetermined ordering from top to bottom. For example, all files and folders on the hard disk are organized in a hierarchical. There are two types of hierarchical clustering, device and agglomerative. Then hierarchical clustering also known as the similar to the binary tree. The data mining and statistics hierarchical clustering, also called hierarchical cluster analysis or HCA, is a method of cluster analysis that seeks to build a hierarchy of particular clusters. The hierarchical clustering is a simple but prone method for the analyzing gene expansion data by building cluster of gene with similar pattern of expansion. This is done by the iterative grouping together genes that are highly correlated in their expansion matrix. What is the hierarchical method? Hierarchical methods are based on a given instance. The cluster is set S of n point as follows. Initially, each point is considered to be a cluster itself. As long as there are two or more cluster pairs like C to C, cluster is joined into one cluster, minimum for all clusters. लिमिटेशंस क्या होती हैं हायरार्किकल क्लस्टरिंग की, वो भी देखते हैं। एक बार पानी पी ले। There are two types of hierarchical clusterings. One is the agglomerative, one is the hierarchical clustering, dense clustering. Then the agglomerative hierarchical clustering. Agglomerative clustering is one of the most common type of the hierarchical cluster used to group similar objects in cluster. Agglomerative clustering is also known as the Agine, agglomerative nesting. In agglomerative clustering, each data point acts as the individual cluster, and at each step, data objects are grouped in a bottom-up method. Initially, each data object is in its the cluster at each iteration, and the clusters are combined with the different cluster until one cluster is formed. Then the agglomerative hierarchical clustering algorithms determine the similarity between individual all and all other clusters. Find proximity metrics. Another one is consider each data points as an individual cluster. Then combine the similar clusters. Recalculate the proximity metrics for each cluster. Repeat step 3 and 4 until you get a single clusters. Let's understand this concept with the help of the graphical representation using a dendrogram. With the help of the given dendrogram, we can understand that how the actual algorithm works. Here, no calculation has been done. Below, all probability among the clusters are assumed. Let's suppose we have the 6 different data point P, Q, R, S, T, V. Then this is the diagram like P, Q, R, S, T, V. Then this is the P and Q is the combined data like QR, and S and T is combined data like ST, and V is the separate. Then like 3 database is collected as TV. Then here is the data collection of QR, T and V. Then QRTV. Then after directly connected P. Then showing the data PQRSTV. Then step 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Then labeling the data and showing the hierarchy of protocol. Step 1. Consider each alphabet P, Q, R, S, T, V as an individual cluster and find the distance between the individual cluster from all other clusters. Step 2. Now margin the comparable cluster in a single cluster. Let's say cluster Q and cluster R similar to each other so that we can merge them in the second step. Finally, we get the cluster P, QR, ST and V. Step 3. Here we recalculate the approximately as per the algorithm and combine the two closest cluster ST and V together to form the new clusters P, QR and STV. Step 4. Repeat the same process. The clusters STV and PQ are comparable and combined together to form a new cluster. Now we have P, Q, R, S, T, V. Step 5. Finally, the remaining two clusters are merged together to form a single cluster P, Q, R, S, T, V. Then division hierarchical clustering. Divisive hierarchical clustering. Divisive hierarchical clustering. Hierarchical clustering is exactly the opposite of agglomerative hierarchical clustering in densive hierarchical clusterings. All the data points are considered in individual cluster, and in the every iteration that the data points that are not similar are separated from the clusters. The separated data points are treated as an individual cluster. Finally, we are left with n clusters. In showing this diagram, PQRSTUV TV. Then again separate PQRSTV. Then divide. Then QRSTV. Then separate STV. Then separate ST. Then separate here V. And then here S and T. Here is the QR. Then separate Q and R, and then after directly to the P. Then step 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1, showing the data. Then what is the advantage of hierarchical clustering? क्या फायदा होता है? It is similar to implement and gives the best output in some cases. 1. It is easy and result in the hierarchy a structure that contains more information, and it does not need us to pre-specify the number of clusters. Then disadvantage of hierarchical clustering: it breaks the large cluster. It is difficult to handle different size clusters and convex shape. It is sensitive to noise and outlier. The algorithm can never be changed or deleted once it was done previously. Then density-based clustering. Density-based clustering in data. Density-based clustering refers to a method that is based on the local cluster criteria such as the density connected points. In this tutorial, we will discuss density-based clustering with example. Then, what is the density? What is density-based clustering? Density-based clustering refers to one of the most popular unsupervised learning methodology used in the module building and machine learning algorithms. The data point in the region separated by the two clusters of low point density and considered as noise. The surroundings with a radius E of a given object are known as the E neighborhood of the object. If the E neighborhood of the object compares at least a minimum number of min bits of a object, then it is called a core object. Then the density-based clustering background. There are two different parameters to calculate the density-based clustering. One is the EPS. It is considered as the maximum radius of the neighborhood. Min-pits refers to the maximum number of points in an EPS neighborhood of that point. NEP K belongs to D and distance IK less than equal to EPS. Directly density reachable. 1. A point I is considered as the directly density reachable from a point K with respect to EPS means pit. If I belongs to NEPS, then core point conditionally NEPS greater than equal to min pits. Then showing in this diagram 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. This is the K area, or this is the I area. Min PTS equal to 5 and EPS equal to 1 centimeter. Then density reachable. A point denoted by I is a density reachable from a point J with respect to EPS min fits if there is a sequence chain of a point I1 in I1 equal to G, Pn equal to I such that the II plus 1 is directly density reachable from the II. Then this is the density I and J. This is the II. Then this is the density reachable point. This is the density reachable points. Density connected. A point I refers to the density connected to a point J with respect to EPS. Yes, if there is a point O such that both I and J are considered as the density reachable from O with respect to EPS and min fits. वर्किंग ऑफ डेंसिटी बेस्ड क्लस्टरिंग्स कैसे काम करता है डेंसिटी बेस्ड क्लस्टरिंग Then working of density based clustering, suppose a set of objective is denoted by D. We can say that an object is denoted by D. We can say that an object I is directly density reachable from the object J only if it is located within the E neighborhood of J and J is a core object. An object I is density reachable from the object J with respect to E and min pit in a given set of objects D only if there is a sequence of objects chain point I1 in I1 equal to J Pn equal to I such that I plus 1 is directly density reachable from I with the respect to E and min pits. An object I is the density connected object J with respect to E and min pit in a given set of object D only if there is an object O belong to D such that both point I and J are density reachable from O with respect density reachable from O with respect to E and min pits. Then the major features of density based clustering. Then the primary features of density based clustering are given below. It is a skin method. It requires the density parameter as a termination conditions. It is used to manage noise in data clusters. Density based clustering is used to identify clusters of arbitrary size. Then density based clusters method DB-scan. DB-scan stands for the density based spectral cluster applications with the noise. It depends on the density based noise of cluster. It is also identify the cluster of arbitrary size in the spectral database within the outliers, showing in these diagrams. This is the border, core, outlier, and showing the border, core area, then outliers. ये था आपका. अब नेक्स्ट आपका OPT ऑप्टिक्स, ये हम करेंगे नेक्स्ट लेक्चर में.